joining us this morning. This is obviously a very well-timed session in the context of the transformation that approvals and procurement are going through at the Department of Technology. Today we have a couple of speakers who are deeply entrenched in the process of essentially getting those programs out within the department. But also we have some distinguished panel members who are from the Department of Technology as well as Department of Finance, who are here to basically listen to all of your concerns and observations about the programs that are being rolled out. So in that context, I wanted to get the process started, but we do have some ground rules. You know, we essentially are bringing control agencies to the table, and they generally come with some ground rules that we all have to follow. So first off the bat, we're going to hold on questions and answers until the end of the presentations. There is a document on each table that you can use in order to basically jot down your questions. What we would like to do is basically have you indicate whether your questions are related to approvals or procurement so that we can guide the question to the proper individual to answer them. Also, in the during the presentations, please do not have any side conversations. Hold all of your conversations until the questions and answer session starts. So just as a way of introductions, we have the first speaker, who is Francisco Lujano. Francisco is currently a branch chief of project oversight and consulting division at Department of Technology. He's leading the transformation of the state's traditional project approvals into a collaborative and interactive project approvals program that will flow with your business dynamics, as opposed to the traditional process where you would develop an FSR, send it to Department of Technology and then Finance and DGS and such. The new approvals process will essentially work with your department on an ongoing basis to develop the program according to your business dynamics. Francisco has over 25 years of experience in program management, serving in various executive leadership positions across 3 major agencies. He has extensive experience with policy development and implementation at Department of Technology, the State Treasurers, Department of Information Technology, CalSTRS, and Department of Pesticide. He has 15 years of project management experience leading complex statewide programs and cross-functional teams comprised of technical and business area specialists. Francisco is a Chico State graduate, so he has a lot of partying experience, as I'm sure you'll tell, and a certified project management professional. Please welcome Francisco. Second speaker is Russ Guarna. I've known Russ for almost 15 years now, and he's quite a man and knows his procurement stuff better than anybody else in state government. Russ is currently the Deputy Director of Procurement Division at the Department of Technology. He's leading a team of specialists responsible for strategic IT solutions, such as the next generation of CalNet, public safety communications, and large-scale IT contracts that just moved from DGS over to Department of Technology. Russ will be responsible for spearheading that program. Russ has over a decade or two of experience and education in procurement. He was previously the Deputy Director at CTA, Program and Policy, Purchasing Manager for DGS Procurement, Team Lead for the Procurement Performance Review under Governor Schwarzenegger, and a purchasing agent with U.S. Army and a corporate buyer within the private sector. Russ is a CSUS Sac State alumni. Go Russ. A certified project manager, and has received many awards for his contributions to the procurement profession. Please welcome Russ Guarna. I'm going to get Francisco up here so that he can begin the presentation, and then I'll come back up after Russ's presentation to introduce the panel members.
Good morning, and thank you for coming this morning. And the reason Nasser wants to get me up here quickly is because they tell me I talk too much, so he's going to want to keep me within my time frame. So let me get started. Actually, today's presentation is really an overview of what's coming and what we're looking at doing on our project approval lifecycle. We do have a class that's offered at the training center. It's a 4-hour class that goes into much more depth on what we're doing and how to fill out the form. So if you're from a department and you want to know much more about this, then I suggest you go to the the OTEC Training Center, upcoming events, sign up. There's a waiting list, so all the classes are filled, but we're adding classes as the demand keeps growing. So we actually started out with 25 people per class, and it's grown to 55. So this is a good overview. So to start out, over the past year, we've undertaken this initiative that will change the way the state approves IT projects. Now, this IT approval lifecycle initiative will, we believe, is going to improve the quality and likelihood of success for technology projects. Throughout the stage gate process, which this is the model we're looking at, we're only asking for the information necessary to get past that stage. So when you look at this model, you're going to see that it builds upon itself, where you have different stages, you pass through gates, and as the approvals go forward, you actually are able to refine the information that you're collecting. So I'm just going to get into it. Now, I have a bad habit of walking around. They told me I can't, so I have to stand behind the podium. So let's see how this works. So a little history. This is what I first talked about, our initiative. We're changing the way we do projects. And quite frankly, we went out, we did some research. We looked at other states, how they approve projects. We looked at the federal government. We went and looked at other countries and private sector. We did a lot of surveys of CIOs, AIOs, questionnaires, had a lot of discussion with folks. They gave us information regarding the pain points of the FSR process, the approval of projects today. And quite frankly, what we found was we really need to re-engineer the whole process. And here's a couple of reasons why. Now, it's not that the FSR process wasn't useful or it doesn't serve its purpose, but it was created back in the late 70s and early 80s. And quite frankly, it was based on the mainframe and data center models. And it was really used to justify the technology. And back in those days, if you all recall, and I do because I'm that old, technology really wasn't widely understood. I mean, we didn't all run around with iPads and iPhones and things of that nature. I mean, it wasn't until 1979 that the Walkman came out. And you all remember people running with their leg warmers, and you had the big old muffy ears. And, you know, it was the greatest thing. Hey, wow, I can listen to music now. And then, oops, sorry. See. And then the Discman came out a little later. And then you'd run with that, and it would skip. But, man, it was still great because you had your CD player there. And then 2001, iPod. Man, that was great. Now, you know, you could put MP3 or different music on there. And then iPhone came out. Forget the iPod. Now I have my phone, and when I'm running or I'm exercising, I can talk to people when they call me. So, and then now we actually have 3D printers that can print a gun that can be used. I mean, that's how far the technology has gone. And I don't think, you know, over the last 34 years, we really don't think about that. You know, I actually have to admit I still have a Walkman in my garage, and it has a cassette in it. So this is what we're going to cover. Today, our current process, what we're looking at, there's a transition period, and then the future release, what we're looking at doing. And this is something we're working on with the Department of Finance and others to figure out how we're going to make this work. So today, our current process, you submit a concept statement, and that concept statement is reviewed and it's looked at. And quite frankly, a concept statement can be a paragraph. Sometimes they're sentences, and we call it a beer and a napkin, where someone can sit after work and on a napkin and figure out that they're going to have this concept statement submitted. So then the concept statement is reviewed, supported, and then you develop this FSR. You go out, you put this document together, it's 150 pages, and you submit it to us. We review it. If it needs well, we review it, it's approved, and then your project starts, and you go off with an RFP. So you go out with your RFP, and you're told it's got to be done quickly. You have 6 weeks, and you're like pushing it. And what happens? You go out, there's delays, more delays, and you estimated your project at $30 million, and you do this, and then 12 months later, You actually get your bids in, and the cost isn't 30 million, it's 90 million, and now you're a year behind. So now, what happens? You have to do an SPR. And lo and behold, you need to do a BCP. And then your project gets in the newspapers because you're a lousy project manager because you can't keep on schedule within budget, and quite frankly, your project hasn't even started yet. So, and then your project is done and you peer it out. So that's today. And if you really think about it, it's the process that's causing us the problems, because we hear in the news from the B how lousy state workers are at doing projects, when in fact that's not true. 85% of our projects are on time, within budget, and on schedule. 85%. That's better than private industry, but you don't hear about that. And when you look at the reasons why, one of the big reasons is the actual process that we use to approve projects. Now, what we're talking is a transition. The transition phase would be the stage 1 business analysis, which I'm going to call S1BA because it's too long to say it all the time. Now, what's going to happen here is the S1BA is going to replace the concept statement. Once that's approved, it's going to you'll have the okay to go on with your FSR. The S1BA will replace section 3 of the FSR, and then the process remains the same. And the reason we're doing that is in this spot right here, we're going to do a pilot, which we're looking to make sure that this new model we're proposing actually works for the state of California, and that we can marry it up with the budget process, because the budget process is in cement. It's not going to change. So what we're going to do is try to marry up where this process can work, where it makes sense to the state of California departments, and we can actually get through this in a sensible way. So we really, really have to go through this and make sure that it works, and we can work out any quirks that it has. So here's the actual stage gate model itself. It consists of 4 stages: the business analysis, the alternative analysis, procurement analysis, and solution analysis. Now, if there's not a procurement, then we're going to be able to skip that stage, but that's part of what the pilot's going to do. We're going to look at, well, I'll get into that a little bit later. So, and you can see that the work's segmented, and each stage will build upon itself. So in the business analysis, that's the first stage, and that's what we're going to concentrate on today. Now, I am going to go over a few of the benefits of this whole model, but that's a little bit later. So here's actually the roadmap. So we have the stage 1, the business analysis, and the different components. Now, we're going to go over these in a little bit more detail, but not much, because, like I said, I have a little bit of time. So stage 2, we're looking at developing your stakeholder requirements, your alternative solution, your recommended solutions. Here we're talking about the procurement, development of the procurement. Now, if you don't need a procurement, this is something that we're looking at. We're going to have 4 different projects: one that requires a procurement, one that requires a budget action, one that does not require a budget action or a procurement, and then the one that flies in off cycle when you get a bill passed and you're mandated to do something in a very short amount of time. And then stage 4 would be, if you do issue an RFP, this is where you would issue it. You would actually select your vendor. You'd get your costs at this point, and you'd actually have your project plans, and your project would really go. And then once it's approved, it would become a project tier. So during this stage gate model, it's a proposal up until the point where you get the approval to go off with the project. So one of the benefits of this later on you'll see is you're able to skip that step where you have to be in front of the legislature, or your chief deputies in front of the legislature trying to explain why costs have tripled, when in fact it was an estimate and you're being held to it. So what's in it for you? Why is this going to be good for you? Well, there's a better focus on the true business need. You're going to be able to have business requirements that are focused in on business requirements and not the technology. Today, you get this proposal that comes in and says, here's my solution, and you go, well, what's the problem? Well, the solution is I need this new database. It does all these wonderful things, and when I come in the morning, I'll have coffee. So, I mean, it gets that ridiculous at times where you have to justify this new solution when you're really not sure what the problem is. Here, we're going to have a focus on the business need and what the true problem is. Also, there's a higher expectation that your program areas being involved with this, because they're the ones that are going to have to be able to provide you with the information on the background of the program, the business need, what are their problems, what are their objectives, and things of that nature. So you'll also get more buy-in up front. the program areas are going to help develop this information. It's going to be their idea. They're going to have to focus in on it. So the business area, the deputy over that business area is going to be highly involved with this and want this project to go forward, so you're going to have upfront buy-in. You're also going to have improved cost estimates before the project begins, because in this model, you're actually not beginning your project until you actually have the bids in from the vendors. Now remember, this is still future state. This is not what we're talking about implementing next month. Organization readiness, better information for the department to prioritize their projects. So now, in our current process, you have a proposed start date, end date, you have proposed estimated cost and a proposed solution, and that's how they prioritize things. In this new model, you're going to have to look at the business need. There's no cost because we're not collecting that this time. So it really looks at what the department needs and what's their priorities. And that's going to be a hard change for people. But as you go through this, coming from a program area for quite a few years, to me that was much more important. Looking at what my program areas do, what they're mandated to do, not necessarily the cost of what the project was going to cost me. And then each stage is going to build upon itself. Again, the stages are segmented, the work cut into sections, and you're able to refine information as you continue to acquire it. Now, accurate cost and realistic information before legislative hearings. Again, when you're always in front of the legislature, you're being accused of not knowing your job when in fact it was truly an estimate. Here, you're actually going to have the bid that comes in. You're going to have the dollars amounts ahead of time, and you're going to be able to build your schedule based on the proposal submitted by your vendor. So it's going to help out a lot in that sense, which will cut down on SPRs and BCPs. And ultimately, we believe that there's going to be more successful projects. So this is our current process. This is what I just described, which is the future release. Now, again, we're working on this. This isn't something that's set in stone yet. We plan on having a pilot to work on this, to figure out how it's going to work in concert with our budget process. Now, what we're talking about here, release of this TL 13-02, which we're looking at release in September. Stage the S1BA, replacing the current concept statement. It also will replace Section 3 of the FSR, and then the rest of the process will remain the same. So we're looking at this as a transition period. So the stage gate, the S1BA, what we're going to be asking for is your stakeholder and your sponsor information, who they are, background on your programs, the business drivers. Why are you doing this? What's driving this? Is it legislation that's causing you to do this? What are your problems or opportunities? Some objectives, and then how it lines up with your strategic plan of your department. So these are what I just talked about, and your program staff, they're the ones who are going to have to be involved with this heavily. Now, at the class we're teaching out at the training center, one of the questions that comes up is, well, my department, we're not going to be able to make them that. Well, we're not going to be able to make the program areas do it either, but it seems like it makes a lot of sense that they'll be involved with this. So we truly believe, I have a lot of faith in departments and executives and state employees that they're going to do the right thing when it comes to how to develop these business analyses. So here are the goals. Again, identifying your sponsor and your shareholders, identifying your business drivers. It could be a financial benefit, cost avoidance, cost savings, and we're going to have definitions of these. So a lot of times departments say, well, I'm avoiding costs. Well, there's a definition the Department of Finance has, and we're going to be sharing that with everyone. It could be program improvements, efficiencies to your program, better services to your to the citizens of California, and also, again, state legislation, federal legislation that mandates things, and also even a court order that says you have to do X, Y, and Z. So that's something that we're also looking at. Then you're going to document your program and your service objectives. So what is it? What's the background of your program so everyone can understand what you're actually doing and what you're trying to do? Identifying your business requirements, the problems, opportunities, objectives, assessing your organizational readiness. This is a big deal for us, and it should be for departments. What we're finding is there may be a department, it has 5 projects that are going. 3 are doing very well, and 2 are failing. And what we've been finding is the 2 that are failing is because the department is taking resources from those 2 to buck up the other 3. So at this point, as a department and as a control agency, you as a department, we as a control agency, we have to be very honest with ourselves that we can actually pull this off. Do we have the readiness or the capability to do this? Because if you don't, failure's on its way. And remember, our success is your success. And if you fail, we fail. Because if you notice when you see these hearings in the B, the department's not the only one getting criticized. Department of Technology is being criticized. Why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? And when did you know? And how did you know? And things of that nature. So we're in this together. We all work for the same people. So we truly want this to be a partnership where we need success. So the rollout, again, it will replace the concept statement and Section 3 of the FSR. Our planned releases is next month. That's our planned release. A technology letter will come out, new SIM sections, business analysis form, the criteria scorecard, evaluation criteria. We're going to have frequently asked questions, and we're actually going to have a sample project out there that you have the scorecard filled out where it shows you an example of a good project and the good answers. Now, we tried to find a project to fill it out with, and we couldn't, so we made one up. So it's all made up, but it is an example of good answers. So, and one of the things we're going to do is we're going to share the information, like the evaluation criteria. So just like when you publish an RFP, the vendor knows this is what you're going to be scored on. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to provide you with our evaluation criteria and how we're going to score this, so you as a department, before you even send it up, can look at it and say, this is a good proposal, and I'm willing to send it up at this time. Or, you know, it has some holes here. Business area, help me work this out. Help me fix this so that it'll go through quickly. And that's something, you know, with the FSR, a lot of people tell us you have to guess on what we want to see. So this is a big change. The IT capital plan, that's going to change a bit as well. So right now, we're no longer going to be asking cost of the proposal. So you're not going to have to estimate your costs, because we all know it's a guess. We're not going to ask you for the proposed solution, because if you don't know the problem, you really don't know the solution yet. And then we're not even going to ask you for the end date of the project, because at this point, you have a proposal. It's not a project. We're also going to eliminate the IT concept toolkit, because we're not going to use IT concepts anymore. And then we understand that there's going to be some upfront work here. So there has to be some analysis done by the program area. So no longer can I sit down and it's like, oh my gosh, my concept statements are due and I'm going to write 3 of them out at night at the kitchen table. That's not going to work anymore. You're actually going to have to put a lot more thought into it. But that upfront work is going to help you in the long run. It's really going to help focus in on what the problem is and what you're trying to solve. And we even believe that there's going to be times when you look at when the department looks at this concept statement, or excuse me, this business analysis, they're going to say, you know what, the solution isn't technology. It may be business process reengineering, and it might stop there at the department. So again, today, this is how we do things. This is what we're talking about with the release of TL 1302 in September. And then the future state, after right here, our plan is to do a 2-year project to make sure that this model that we're proposing actually works, makes sense, and fits in with the state of California and our needs. So the future state is not there yet, and we're still working on it. So I did pretty good. Usually it takes an hour to do this presentation. So thank you, and questions are going to be answered later. Okay. So Russ, you're up.
Okay, thank you. So I'm assuming this advances us, right? Nope, that goes backwards. Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here. We're kind of new. We're not even 7 weeks old as far as our organization goes. The transition of the authority between DGS and our office is still underway. So really, I'm kind of a concept and a work in progress. So you saw the little under construction thing. That's what we are. We're kind of a new idea starting out. What Francisco said earlier about things that haven't changed since the 70s, well, this is procurement. We're kind of doing the same things that we did in the 70s. We're just kind of reformatting different fonts. But pretty much it hasn't really changed. If you've been around as long as I have, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So when we took over this authority from DGS, we basically, oh, by the way, if you don't know, our authority is very limited. It's what we call the non-delegated reportable projects. And if you want me to explain that, I can. Some of you probably understand that. So we went in with the thought process that we wanted to do things differently. I mean, if we were just going to move it from DGS to technology department, what's the point? So we decided that, we're going to flip the model. I'm kind of a procurement heretic anyway, so I thought, what the hell? I can't get fired. So we decided, well, I can, but, hey, you just get another job, right? So really what we were focusing on is to streamline the processes, make faster, smaller procurements, manage vendors and contracts much better than we have in the past, and then start collecting data on performance outcomes. I think that's kind of the most important thing. We run all these procurements, but we really don't we do some really well and we do some really bad. And so, there isn't any consistency in how the models are put together. It's been kind of an intensive people process, really. So as we're moving forward, we got this unit and we had a 50% vacancy rate from the DGS transition. So we're having to hire a lot of people. So our focus is getting really highly talented people. We decided to take an organizational focus on procurement rather than a people-driven focus. So we're organizing our teams into pods. So rather than if you've ever worked, how many have done a procurement with DGS? Oh, wow. Okay, good. Let's just skip ahead there. No, I'm kidding. You only get one analyst kind of. Well, we're sending you a team now. And so you have a lot of coverage. You have a lot of different ideas. And it's less focused on that individual's comfort levels. So the other thing is, in collaborating, like Francisco said, we are part of basically the life cycle now. We appear in stages 2, 3, and 4. So that kind of shows you that the procurement has a beginning and definitely an end that's very important to you and your projects. The other thing is we're taking kind of a customer-centric focus on this, and that is that we're also looking at the vendors as one of our partners. And those of you who are estate people, you're actually our customers. That's the way we like to look at both of you. No adversarial relationships. We want to make sure that, this is a highly collaborative area, although it may not seem if you've been in one before. And this is, we get that when she was talking downstairs about MSU. This is the world of MSU, believe it or not. As many things as that are defined in procurement, a lot of it's been made up over the years. So as we go forward, we're trying to look at things of building a new infrastructure in procurement. So that under construction area, this is I should have spelled the acronym out, but the acronym here, it's an RFQP, which is Request for Qualifying Proposals. This is where we pre-qualify all of our vendors first before even doing a procurement. So you talk about how to make things streamlined. We're taking a lot of the things that we do every single time. So for example, if we've been dealing with one of the integrators for 50 years, we qualify them on every single procurement. And they could do 10 a year, and we do it every single time with them. So it's kind of, why do we keep doing that? Definition of insanity. Let's do it one time and update it, start collecting data on them on a frequent basis. The other thing is we also want to leverage the project approval process to make stronger procurements. As Francisco showed you throughout, that one of the things we're missing is a solid development of business requirements and a focus on what we're trying to do that carries through the whole procurement. This isn't just a start and stop, it's a continuum. The other thing is it's also developing, like I mentioned, metrics and data to show where we've been successful and who we've been successful with. The other thing is also new templates. It's changed the format. I mean, literally, we've been running the same, we call it 10-section procurement since probably 1970. So you go, really, we're doing the same thing. Definition of insanity again. How many times we keep doing this and expect a different result? The other thing is also to train our staff to be more focused on customer delivery, customer service, and those type of things. What we're trying to really focus on is increased bidder participation because, again, getting one bid pretty much doesn't give you many options, does it? Also, as I mentioned before, redundant processes. We do a lot of things over and over. We repeat them. Even within the process, we repeat them several times. The recognition that time is money for both us and the vendors. I mean, we need to basically, we want to start off with a 6-month expectation of completion of procurement. It's not radical, it's actually doable. Designing these things to be more efficient, the interactions that we do, how we build things, the models we use, more efficiency in those. Reducing the size and complexity of these things. Sometimes they're just too large to be successful. Too many things have to happen. Too many things are going on at one time. If we phase and structure things better, we can have better outcomes. We're also big believers in what we call 6611. If you're not familiar with that, that's basically a negotiation process, or in essence, a best and final offer. We're firm believers in that. What do we need from you on your end? Because again, if you're somebody who works with us, you know, it's all about the project. As a matter of fact, that's kind of our mantra. It's project first, procurement second. Governance is important. Naturally, resources that are committed to the project. I mean, I don't know how many times I've done procurements in my career that they were under-resourced. Day one of the project, you meet one person, the project manager, you know, and it's like, that's it. You're the only one there. And then this thing has to be built on the fly, which doesn't work well. Complete requirements, again, it's one of those things, know what you're trying to accomplish. You just can't build it as you're going along. And the other thing is good internal technical and business relationships. We found a lot of times the business and technical areas really aren't integrated or working well together. So that's something that up front we need to have straightened out. Process reengineering, I know this is kind of a broken record, but there's a lot to be said. You want cuts, then that doesn't mean you get to change it to do what you do. So, you know, we have to take that approach that modification of our processes has to take place. It doesn't mean that you do something efficiently. It just means you're going to try to contort something that wasn't designed to do it. And that's not a recipe for success. So, and the other thing is, you know, a commitment to change in your organization. I mean, a lot of organizations say they want to change, but when you start to bring in new things, it kind of gets ground up. We all know that process. Openness to competition. You just don't meet the first guy that came in and sold you on doing this and want to get there at the end with them. You have to be open-minded about other products and services that are out there to help you. And then having a blueprint for success is really, really important. Planning well for it, getting through it in time, resources, those are all things that we all do in project management. And that's very important for us to do. So unlike Francisco, I'm really fast. I get through things. So really, and my point simply is this. We're building this today, and you're going to see a different procurement model in the future. We've actually, at this point in our transition with DGS, we're keeping a lot of the projects in flight, so they don't look really that much different today. The newer models you're going to see are going to have a more technical focus. We are actually going to lean more heavily into the technical solutions, the architectures, those type of things that we need to know up front, not when we're in development. So those are the things that you're going to notice different when you start to deal with me and my team. You know, that's going to be the difference in us, and we hope that you can give us your support on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Francisco. Before we go to the next stage, what I'd like to do is take a quick minute and ask the audience for any particular lessons learned that you would like the panel members to hear about. This is with regards to your past experience. How many of you are project managers in different state organizations? Okay. How many of you are procurement officials? What do the rest of you do? Just kidding. So in that context, there is an interest in learning about, you know, past experiences you've had, good, bad, indifferent. The good, of course, we want the panel members to hear about and do their best to retain in the new processes being developed. The bad, of course, we want them to also know about so that we don't repeat history and, again, experience project failures and such. So go ahead.
Well, my name's Tony Spears. I'm with the State Water Board. I'm looking forward to the phasing because in the past that's kind of been discouraged because they were saying that we were trying to split the costs, or I don't know what their thing was, but when I did our timesheet system, I broke it into phases, and to me, I totally agree that it's so much smoother and you're completing something and moving on to the next phase. And I just really agree with that.
So you would advocate for, is that phasing of the project?
Absolutely, and clear phasing. I mean, as you look at the analysis, you kind of say, let's stop here because that's just like a bigger, a bigger thing that we don't want to deal with right now. But you have something that's completely functioning, and then you can add these other functions as you develop it.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other comments?
It'll be nice as a broker.
Could you introduce yourself?
Colleen O'Donoghue from Department of Motor Vehicles. As a project manager, to not have all these estimates in the FSR that's been completed like 2 years prior to the project actually starting. You have a schedule that has you totally off track right to begin with. Technology's changed, and we definitely need this different approach.
Do I have that right? Estimates in FSR that don't materialize because they change?
Yeah, the schedules are usually way off. It's the day you start managing the project, the start date. So you're ready for an SPR basically right out of the chute.
Unrealistic schedule because it's forecast.
Got it. Thank you. Any other lessons learned?
Sometimes it's challenging defining, you go through and you define the future state of your project, your organization, your program. Many times it's very challenging getting those approvals through because DGS didn't necessarily look at future technologies. They had a specified list of technology that was current at the time rather than what you were working toward.
Got it. So how would you characterize that as a sort of a lesson learned? Evolving technology considerations or?
Using enterprise architecture and future technologies in the approved process, in the approval process for, it's one thing to have a team, but if they're not listening to those future technologies and looking out for your strategic plan and your 5 and 10 year goals, I just gave you more words. I don't know.
No, it's actually helping out. So it's basically using enterprise architecture, and there's an IT procurement plan, right, that each department submits as a way to contemplate technology approvals as opposed to a DGS list that may be from the 1970s or 80s. Got it. Very good. Anything? By the way, what's your name?
My name is Joan Isunza from EDD.
How it used to be my.
Implementation. People do implementation as well, right?
I'm sorry, I saw a hand. Introduce yourself, please.
Karen Frutenik from CPSS Social Services. I think it'll be very helpful to have the ability to work on more of a collaborative relationship between our department and yours. I think part of the trouble we've had in the past is that there may be 1 or 2 people who have in the project or in the organization that have a good working relationship with DGS or whoever's working on the procurement, but it almost becomes like folklore. It's like I've heard this person has this great relationship from 5 years ago, but right now no one really knows who to contact or how to work through problems, and it creates a little bit of, I think, an adversarial relationship. It'd be nice to move forward with a more collaborative relationship.
Got it. Would that be just Department of Technology or Finance as well, or
I think it's probably across the board.
all control agencies? Yeah. Okay. Any other? Did I hear something about a list that you mentioned, like list of responsible folks for your particular project?
That would be fantastic if we had. I know that you were talking about organizing people into, pods to work on particular projects, and if everyone kind of knew who those people are and who to contact with different questions.
We can get back to that. Any other lessons learned? Yes.
I'm not so sure if it's a lesson learned category, but you could stop me. You mentioned something about improving the procurement process with vendors or getting to know these vendors and keeping some records on them or something. Is this so that we can, I guess, draw from a good pool of vendors, I would imagine? But what I'm wondering is, when will we ever be able to do away with CMAS, or, for instance, not just that, but when you get something, I have a software that is a COTS off the shelf, right? And there's licensing that's involved in this. So every time when we do a procurement, we have to justify that it's a sole source thing. And I mean, if the project is already approved, and we're doing this software licensing year after year, why on earth, and it's in the FSR, why on earth are we going through 50,000 forms to fill out because it's a sole source vendor? Projects, we own it, what are we gonna do? We can't go anywhere else.
Hate to do this to you, but if you could write that down on a document for me.
Sole source justification, annual sole source.
So, well, yeah, we're more than happy and willing to answer that. Not me, per se. I'm representing private sector. Any other lessons learned in terms of past experiences?
My name is Mary Gomeshi, and it seems every project that I've been involved with has stopped for staff resources, and that goes without exception which department it is.
I'm sorry, stop.
Staff resources.
Has been starving for staff resources, and a lot of them don't get even the nod or approval to get the required staff until 2 or 3 years well into the project. And then they wonder why basically many of the functions are not taking place, or there is no risk manager, there is no change manager, and so forth.
I can answer that for you. The first place they cut funding is training.
Yep.
You don't have the
Yep.
funding to train your own people.
I'm gonna put that down.
Yeah.
I think
You have to be quiet.
That's why I put her over there.
I'm making a note, okay?
Yeah.
All right. I also put down adequate training budget for projects. I think that's very important based on my government experience. I saw another hand go up as, yeah, go ahead.
Michelle Stark from the Department of Water Resources. I just wanted to say that I'm actually happy that I saw that you had the enterprise architecture in the alignment there, because we do have issues with keeping up with technology, but also having the provisions to have that technology at our department, and also the relationships between you're pulling in program people to define the requirements more. That is something that we've already started instituting at DWR, and it has been helping a lot, because the business owners know their business, and we know the technology. So the collaboration there is very important, and it also helps when you're bringing in the technical people, when you're doing the requirements. That also gives them a heads up that this might be coming. So they can be very prepared for when the project does get there, that they've known in advance that the work is coming, so they can try to prepare instead of being hit with it on their desk saying, okay, you're on a project now, we want this done in 6 months, handle it.
That would avoid a lot of negative surprises on all sides of the table. I agree. Okay, I'm gonna keep all of these up here, make it a little more legible. And then what we'll do is, after I introduce the panel members, we will not only address your questions, but also address some of the lessons learned. Do you all have your written questions? Those of you that actually have prepared some? If you do, please hand them to that gentleman in the back of the room so we can bring them forward and take care of them for you. So I'm going to briefly introduce the remaining panel members. Thank you for enlightening us with the lessons learned. In addition to Russ and Francisco, we have Deborah Jackson, who is that no. Deborah is the Chief of IT Procurement Oversight and Consulting Branch at Department of Technology. She has over 20 years of experience managing large and complex IT projects and product development using best practices methodologies and standards in project management, process improvement, change management, and executive oversight. As a seasoned government leader, Deborah supports diverse state programs that include Department of Corrections, Healthcare Services, Controllers, Board of Equalization, and State Student Aid Commission. She provides solid and effective technology leadership to some of the most complex and politically sensitive programs in state government. Please welcome Deborah. Next, to assure you that we have all the parties at the table, we have Susan Davis James, who's basically between you and the money. Susan is the Chief of IT Consulting Unit at the Department of Finance. She has over 25 years of experience participating in various evolutions for IT project approvals, oversight, policy development, and strategic planning within the Department of Finance and the former Department of Information Technology. So she's seen it all. She's been essentially through all the trials and tribulations and is very instrumental in assisting with the transformation that approvals and procurement are going through. Susan is also a CSUS alumni. Go Susan, since I am one as well. And she completed the MIS program at Sac State. She also completed the DGS Project Management Development Program and is a graduate of IT Managers Academy. We have an ad hoc member to the team, and that's Cynthia Hayden. Cynthia is currently the Assistant Project Director of CalHERS, the Benefit Exchange. And she's here to provide project and department level testimonials about the programs that are going through development stage. Cynthia is responsible for implementation of the Health Benefit Exchange. She has over 20 years of experience and education in information systems technology. She has experience with Office of Systems Integration, and she also has experience within U.S. Army. I personally worked with Cynthia at OSI, and she's fantastic as a project manager. She's a Chico State alumni.
Go Chico.
Okay, don't break out any booze now.
No, that's at 4:30.
4:30. All right. So please welcome the panel members, and they are here to basically address your comments about the lessons learned, as well as any questions that. Could you bring those forward, please? And feel free to raise your hands and ask questions, even though you may not have written them down. So the first question, let's see, is with regards to procurement. It basically is asking, what will the new procurement document look like from 10 sections to what? And when will it be final?
It will go from 10 sections to 4, and we already have kind of templates that we're working on now. We're using on some of our newer procurements, but now this is the kind of the problem that we're looking at here is that we only use them on the procurements that we use. They're not used by the DGS delegated users. So if you have a DGS delegation, these templates probably won't be available to you for a while because they're only used by the technology department. It's a little hard to explain that, but that's basically because if you have a delegation, you're under the DGS wing. We are not. So we don't follow the same processes that they do. So unfortunately, if you're wanting to do it on your own procurements, you'll have to follow their templates until we collaborate with them. But they're actually available now. So.
Thank you, Russ. I think the next question is for approvals. It says, is S1BA to be approved similar to current concept statement approval, I believe it is. Francisco?
Yes, our thought is that we're going to continue the process the same way as today. So another TL will go out with instructions on the IT capital plan. So instead of having concept statements submitted, there'll be the S1BAs, and we figure that the time frame and the process will be the same.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute, one more thing. Toga.
Next question is I also approvals. How will the new approval process affect M&O?
The S1BA should not. Again, the S1BA will place the concept statement, Section 3 of the FSR, and the rest of the process will remain the same. Now, once the new model comes about and we work out the tweaks, there may be some changes there, but as it stands today and what's coming out, it should not make a difference.
Thank you. The next question, thank you. Oh, this is a multi-level complex one. All right. Next question is, why does it take so long for approvals? Susan, would you like to add this? No. There's no money. I'm not answering that question.
Well, the approval process at times was very lengthy. If you're talking about the FSR feasibility study process, or you're talking about the procurement process, which are two different process approvals. We have recently just tried to change the feasibility study process where we're collaborating upfront and early with Susan's group, with the budget, the other part of Susan's finance group, which is budgets, with OTEC, which is Department of Technology, our security units, our other different divisions out there. So we're trying to work with everybody upfront to speed up the approval process. And we started this last year to try to get everybody on the same page, get everybody understanding, and provide one set of questions out to departments on feasibility studies. Work with the departments, have them answer the questions, make sure everybody's satisfied with the results, and then approve the process. We also have been working with the departments to help write the FSRs at times, guide them. We can't write it for you, but we can guide you and assist you in writing feasibility studies so that they are clearly defined. You get tunnel vision when you write them. You're so used to what it is, but an outsider reading it doesn't understand. So we try to provide those kind of points to you and guide you through it. But we do collaborate early with finance and try to get approved. We are going to be working with Russ's group, Procurements, as well. They also receive them, so he just started, so we're gonna start collaborating with Russ. Hopefully that answered the question. I don't know if it was procurement. If it is, Russ just started and he's planning to make that process a lot more streamlined. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, personally speaking, from my perspective, I actually used to work at Department of Information Technology, and this is like a family reunion for me. The traditional process was somewhat bureaucratic, and control agency behaved like a control agency and really kept its distance from departments in the context of providing the guidance and the leadership. The process that I see now is very interactive. It's basically getting involved in your business dynamics from concept all the way through teaming up with you with regards to the approvals with the legislature, finance, and I see that being somewhat different in the context of the fact that you're not going to, the length of time is not going to be as visible. You know, they're going to be part of the program helping you through the entire process. So it's going to really streamline, from what I can see, the different aspects of getting the approvals so that the whole situation is taken care of. The next question is, I believe, about the sole source that was asked earlier. It's basically asking, once a system is implemented and it uses COTS, all sole source license to support the renewal, why are the ongoing annual costs that were identified in the FSR scrutinize so much and require more documentation and have to go through DGS each time?
Okay. Don't know, but in the future, on the reportable projects that you work with us on, we probably will not require NCBs on those kind of things, just for the simple fact is we understand the business case. Does that make sense?
It does,
mean-
and it just seems like it's additional work for everyone.
I can't see who's.
It's
Oh, sorry, thanks.
fine.
You know, I'm not gonna speak for what another department does. I know in how we view things, we understand, well, because we worked in the project side too. So we understand how it got there. So it doesn't make any sense to us to justify what's already part of your current business environment today, moving forward. It's constraint. It's just one of the things you have to deal with. So naturally, it does affect those types of solutions you might get. But again, that's a constraint just like any requirement you might have. So in working with us, that'll be how you'll deal with us. So going forward, again, I can't speak for another department, so.
Next question has to do with, may I get a copy of the slide presentation so that I can quickly inform my program representatives? I have 4 projects that I must get in by October. On each table, there is a signing sheet. Please use that to provide your contact information, and I'll make sure that each and every one of you have a copy of the entire presentation, including the. Absolutely.
Also, too, remember there's out at the training center website, upcoming events, there's a 4-hour class where we go in much more detail about the Stage 1 BA, how to fill it out, the new tools that are coming out. We're asking for SMART objectives, your goals, objectives, and metrics. So that's a very good class to be able to take. It will help you a lot, and you'll be on a waiting list, but we're also adding more classes based on the demand. So this was a very high overview. So that class, 4 hours long, and a lot of good information.
And you don't want it.
No, you can have it.
Next question is, when will the future model of procurement be rolled out?
Well, it's underway. Like I said earlier, we have some that we're starting off already, and we're doing those. We've been able to impact some of the current projects that are in flight. We have like 20 projects that we inherited in our portfolio from DGS. So some of those are in varying stages, but you'll start to see some of our new projects coming out probably in the next few months. So as these things are kind of, as you know, they take a while to build and develop. So we're hoping to get our first procurements out in probably about 2 or 3 months. So then you'll start to see probably what we believe a drastic change in this area. More dialogue, more interaction. It may drive you crazy because we're going to talk to you too much. But I think most folks that we talk to about this, especially on the vendor side, are really looking forward to that interaction. And the same with the departments. We actually want to help you be successful, and we're not about bureaucracy. Like I mentioned about the things that we recognize in constraints and stuff, we understand those things going into these things. We don't want to add more onto your plate than you already have. But we want you also to think through what you really need to do. So it's a two-way street. So thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
I've given my phone number and email and everything in several different locations today. And what I'd love to see from it is that I am now going to be on some list so that when new training comes up, I'm going to get it sooner than later. Because this was totally booked by the time I was even informed about it. Is that a possibility?
I'll defer that to, can she become part of a group that gets?
I think that's the intent. I'm not sure. I wasn't involved in the design of the conference.
I do know that, I also, due to a variety of reasons, got in late. And so I received something already, I don't know if you have, regarding the security, one coming in October. So I think there was an automatic being put on the list.
Oh, you're talking about these sessions, these.
I'm talking about any kind of training that you're providing that's coming up.
I think there's gonna be multiple things, because when it comes to these conferences, et cetera, that's gonna be a separate, it's managed differently than DOT, so.
Yeah.
But I know there was a list at one point.
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll provide the contact information that you provide me to the panel members, and then they can essentially act accordingly. But you're already registered with this particular conference, so you'll be getting notifications about future ones coming.
That's perfect. Thank
And
you.
if you look at our website, Department of Technology, there is a section on different training opportunities. Christy Borchin is acting right now, so if you just go to the website, just search around, you'll find training and upcoming events. So we do have it there.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question right here.
Yes. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Penny Moore. I'm with the State Controller's Office, and I'm also a partner on the Fiscal Project. Years ago, the state began an initiative to develop a professional procurement classification series, and that kind of waned away, unfortunately. But, you know, with that series was a requirement for education and certification to become a professional procurement person in the state of California. Do you see that initiative perhaps being rejuvenated as a result of this effort?
I agree with you. I know what happened in that classification. It kind of dropped off the map. But I agree with you. I came from the federal government, which had a very defined professional procurement series. And I think that's kind of been detrimental in the state. We haven't had that. So again, that's where that MSU stuff comes in, because a lot of people who didn't have a procurement experience got into it, and then it's kind of, it lost its focus as far as development of staff. And so I would love personally to see that come back. I support that. I think you'll find in some of the things we're putting forward and with Christy in those areas that we're looking to doing that somewhere. Don't know when though, so it's like many things, it's out there. So.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Harjeet Singh from OSI. The question is, are the training classes available they are online or they are in classroom?
I believe most of the training that we do at CTA has a classroom seminar, and they are held out at our training center out in Rancho Cordova, most of them. These seminars are usually held either here at the convention center. So they vary. It's not that we have CBT's online training or anything like that. It is more so hands-on training.
So the sign up is on a CTA website, right?
It will show the list, and it will give you the registration URL. It will have a link to the class syllabus and how to get involved and sign up.
Okay.
So yeah, just go there.
Okay.
For these events, you go to pspforum.us, and your registration is handled on that website, as well as all of these sessions that have presentations are being videotaped. So soon after the sessions are over, in a few days, maybe a week or so, all of the videos will be available online for you to essentially review them, or if you missed the session, you can basically catch up in that fashion. So, all right.
I'm Regina Bell. I'm from the Air Resources Board. I know the state has a project management classification, but it's very limited as far as its usage. Is that to be expanded, since we need to have more professional project managers in the different divisions?
Well, I know Christy has plans to do training on a project management series of training. And now as far as DPA expanding the classifications, I'm certain. Does anyone else know?
I thought it was in the pilot program that was started at CDCR and expanded to information technology. Did you not have a pilot program?
I believe that's what they're intending to do. Oh, when Christy comes. You could notify Christy Borchin on the website and ask her, and she'll give you all the information she has.
Fahal Ahmed, also from Air Resource Board. The technology letter, when is that going out? Is that next month or is that October?
We're anticipating in September.
Finalized templates will be available?
Yes, everything will go out, the TL, the criteria the evaluation criteria, the scorecard, frequently asked questions. And part of the problem, it's not really a problem. We were an agency and we were able to put things out. Now we're a department within an agency, so now there's a new process that we have to go through. So it's delaying things, which makes sense, and so we're just delayed a little bit, but the expectation is September, early September.
Any other question? Yes.
Do you have any periodic newsletter that comes out with the developments that are taking place? Because there are lots of changes that are taking place now, so to keep people informed of those.
I think there'll be several procurement components.
On the procurement side, there's, just like Francisco said, there is a technology letter about the procurement change, and it is working its way out also. And the same with DGS, they're announcing one on their side and ours at the same time. So you should be seeing those soon, as soon as they get through the vetting process.
So how do I subscribe to those?
I think you're either on the distribution list for, like for example, under procurement, they send out blasts, as they call them, on those. On the technology letters, they're put out on our website, and then also the CIOs are notified when new policy changes are coming out.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this question is directed to Russ. I'm Michael from the Franchise Tax Board.
Hey,
So
Michael, how you
thank
doing?
you all for your presentation, and I really like some of the things you're talking about. If we're just talking in terms of procurement, perhaps some of the issues, and there are a lot of issues involved, all the way from the
There's no
department.
issues in procurement
Yeah,
at all.
all the way from the department, all the way from the departments being us, maybe not doing everything we should be doing, right, to get you guys good quality products. But it's hard to talk about improvements to the schedule without talking about legal service review. So my question to you is, what changes should we expect to see from, because the traditional process is it goes and gets reviewed for 2 months, and then it comes back to make changes, and it takes 2 months, and it goes back. We find new changes, so 2 months back and forth. So what should we expect to see from the department end in terms of legal review?
We integrate our legal reviews a little bit better. I won't speak about someone else's legal review, but I know ours, we work very closely with our chief of counsel and his staff, and they're I guess I could say they're more integrated with us, and we don't seem to have the time delays, and we tend to collaborate a lot more on things. So in the procurements we've done, we've been in telecom now for almost a year and a half. We've had no delays that you would even notice, actually. There isn't a throw it over the fence, get it back. Our folks meet with them, we collaborate, we talk to them, and within days we're getting our answers back. So, and it isn't that give it to me once and then give it to me back again. We tend to look at it once and move forward. So we have not experienced in the last year and a half any substantial delays for as much as we've worked with them. And we don't use the same model as our predecessor did.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Carlos. You can't ask a question of your own people.
Director Ramos? Yeah.
I just wanted to add in something too that might be helpful. I think this evening, by the way. So one other thing that I think you'll see different, we bring a different perspective to it, and I've talked to our attorneys about this. From my perspective, what I'm after is successful projects. Right? Defending and getting ready for a lawsuit is fine. Protecting the state is fine. Completing a procurement is fine. But ultimately what we need successful projects. So I think the perspective our attorneys are going to bring is a little different. They're part of getting us to a successful project. My own experience in other jobs that I've had is that when your agency doesn't have responsibility or accountability for the success or failure of a project, the perspective you bring is more about, okay, how do we prepare for a protest? How do we prepare for a lawsuit? How do we prepare for defending the state in litigation? And then our perspective is going to be, yeah, those are important. What's more important though is getting to an end of the project successfully. So I think that'll help as well.
Thank you, Director Ramos. Welcome. I saw you sneak in the back. I was going to put him on the spot, but he stood up and responded. So any other questions? Yes.
As a comment, you had stated non-delegated.
Reportable projects, yes. That's how our, if you read the new section, I'm sorry, I should stand up, Our new section in statute clearly defines that it's just a carve out basically of what DGS's authority was. And that is, it's non-delegated, which means your procurement threshold, and reportable, which also means your project approval threshold. So those two things working in concert or separately, depending on how, because you could have a reportable project that could be under your delegation that we would have to do for you. So it's kind of we kind of have to work between those two little boundaries. But we have no problems in collaborating like with departments like FTV and something who have larger delegations than most, so it should work out fine.
Other questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if Russ could talk to the difference between procurement delegation and project delegation.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to, is that all departments have two types of delegations. And one is strictly on your procurement side that you've literally gotten through an application process with DGS, where they assign you delegation levels based on what they perceive your competency to be. And those vary in, for example, you can get a delegation strictly for using the CMAS and master programs. You can get a competitive delegation, which can vary anywhere between 5,000 to, you guys have what, 3.5 or 5 million?
We have 3 million, but I think OTEC has 5 now.
Okay, 5 million is a cap, and the lowest is 5,000. So you could land somewhere between there, and that is your procurement delegation of what you can procure yourself. Anything that isn't under those or is over those thresholds, you would have to go to either DGS or now us to do the project. Taking the other side of it, you have your project approval delegation, which comes through the technology department. Did I get that right? And I think finance is in there somewhere. I can't remember. Okay, just technology department. And that is basically what your project approval authority is. So a lot of departments have about 1 million, somewhere in that range. And that is what you have to do before you have to submit an FSR to the technology department. So if it's under your delegation for approval, you do it in-house. If not, then you submit it forward, unless you need a budget action again, or if it's a critical project. Legislation, yes, thank you. So there's some parameters in there, and those are actually defined in SIM and SAM. So those are when we talk about reportable and non-delegation, those are the two benchmarks that we use to determine if it would be done by our office or done by you. Does that help? Thank you. Yes, oh.
Could you also speak to associated contracts, say consultants or other types of contracts that go along with the project, but whether they're at DGS still or if they're
That also depends on how they are. If they're part of a reportable project, those, we'll call them ancillary contracts, would potentially go through us. If they're part of your operational base, for example, under your work group computing and those kind of things, or for productivity, those would fall under the authority of DGS. So there's that kind of balance beam on those. So a lot of folks do most of those. They'll be usually under those type of projects, unless you're on a mega project. Those usually fall under your delegated level, and you can do them under your CMAS or your MSAs or lighter weight RFO, RFQ type procurements under your delegation. Most of the ones I've seen. There are some that are larger, and then those would fall into more of a formalized procurement model. Did that help? Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I want to take a couple minutes and have the panel members address some of the lessons learned that you articulated. The first one is phasing of the projects. Any of you would like to address that as far as the future plans with regards to the approvals and procurement?
Phasing of projects, we do agree that projects should be phased. It's not that you phase it out to write separate FSRs, it's still potentially one project. It just says that you have the ability to stop after a set phase because that is a chunk of the project which can be measurable, and you can live with that piece of the project if you cannot further continue. So we do suggest that phasing is done. It's not to have 3 separate FSRs instead of having one FSR that covers 3 phases. So if it is the same project, it should be in the same FSR. Does that make any sense? Everybody understand what I'm trying to convey? Yes.
So when you do the phases, so you do phase one and time goes on and now you're looking at phase two, you may need to adjust phase two. So do you have to then do a second FSR for phase two, even though you did it in the first one? Say there's 3 phases and you finish phase one and then you look at phase two and say, we need to revamp this based on what we know now and the changes that have been made. Would you have to do a new one at that point?
Okay, to answer that, it should have been described all in the original FSR. If you go over 10% in scope, schedule, or cost, then you potentially would have to do an SPR, a special project report. We do have associated representation for each agency, which is listed on our website. So our person at our agency that is your representative would help guide you in determining if you need an SPR and monitoring your portfolio. So potentially you would have to do an SPR, maybe stuff that you didn't understand or didn't know yet when you got to phase two. I understand where you're describing it. But it would probably be an SPR, not a separate FSR, unless it's a separate unrelated project. It depends how your projects are defined. If you're talking phases like she was in the back, she was saying one project, but they did it in 3 different phases. As long as it is one project and it was defined in the FSR, if you get to the second phase and you're determining that we didn't know enough information, it's gonna take longer, we have to procure more, something, whatever else you have to do, we would have you do an SPR and help guide you. We'd work with you. It wouldn't be, oh, just do an SPR. We would work with you and help define what it is. Yes, so.
Related questions about?
I do, actually, I wanna go back to the phasing of the project, so I'm not clear, are we talking about when we say phasing of the project based on the project management process phases? Or are we talking about specific deliverables based on the, predetermined by the project? For example, you may be implementing the financial management ERP, which has 5 or 6 modules. Do you consider each of those modules as a phase of the project?
I think that's what's meant here, to where you define the entire ERP as a need, and then you do the general ledger and something else first to see how that folds. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Actually, is it Joni?
Tony,
You were the one that described your phasing.
Yes, and I'm not sure that I concur with.
Okay.
With what we're saying. With the timesheet process, when we sat down, we analyzed it. We did a systems analysis, but it was clear, just with the systems analysis, that these would be very good breaking points to not introduce at this time. The reason I kind of think that it should be supporting FSRs, like mentioned in the first one, that they would be future phases, but no sense in trying to detail it all out, because sometimes that phase doesn't come for a year and a half or something, or 2. But all your numbers would be wrong and your dates would be wrong, and so it just seems like they could be somehow related.
I think it's going to take collaboration. If you have such an effort to do, I would advise you to bring in technology agency and discuss it with your representative on what is the best approach. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
I believe if it is an ERP solution, you would phase it down into reasonable phases of chunks of different components that you can complete within a set time frame. But it is still all the same project. Depending on each project and what you're trying to achieve, it might be separate efforts. So it might not be one answer for all. Director Ramos has something to add.
Debbie's trying to be very careful too about how she says things. I don't have to be because I'm So let me just add a little bit of context here too, of what we're trying to do. You hit on a very good point. You know, one of the things the projects are always criticized about. You're late, you're over budget, right? And so to a certain extent, our efforts at remaking our processes is to say, let's get past that issue. And so you're absolutely right. You know, to try and totally cost everything out and nail down how much it's going to cost sometimes is a pretty ridiculous exercise. But you're going to get criticized later on if you come back and say, well, we thought it was going to take this long. It's actually going to take 6 months longer and it's going to cost more. which, you know, when you're taking a total shot in the dark. So part of the effort at breaking it up into components is so you don't have to set those baselines so early. So you set them when you actually have a more realistic assessment or an idea of what it is. The other reality that we deal with is sometimes you run into vendors that are not performing. You know, in the session next door, they were just talking about that. How do you deal with them? One of the things that we learned on some of our projects is if you have natural breaking points in a project, you know, whether it's components or functionality or you're going to roll out a certain phase, it makes it much easier to separate yourself from those vendors or to hold them accountable to say, look, if you don't get past this stage, you're not going to the next one. So our efforts are aimed at that. So Debbie's absolutely right. One size isn't going to fit all, but fundamentally the idea of breaking up is it's an attempt at risk management, an attempt at getting more accurate alignment between budgets and schedules, as I spoke about this morning, and to give us the opportunity to have some flexibility in how we build our contracts and how we manage our vendor relationships. And I think it's going to foster more accountability.
Director Ramos, can I get you to join us up here so we can get the full video effect? No. I think there's some other scenarios that you may want to weigh in on in terms of collaboration. I'm sorry, there was a hand going up again? Okay. Going once. The next lesson learned had to do with schedule and cost estimates in the FSR, and I think we kind of touched on that in various degrees, that don't essentially materialize as anticipated. So how do we plan to deal with that in the new transformation of approvals and procurement? Yeah, I'll bring this to you.
Can we go to the slide?
Oh, yeah. Go for it.
Actually, in the new model we're talking about, which is future state, looking here, at this point, you're going to actually come up with your, again, this is in the future after we do our pilot. At this point, the alternative solution, this is where your alternatives would come up, and you'd have your recommended solution, and this is where your first estimate would come at. And then you do your acquisition strategy. In this stage here, you now have more information, more requirements developed, and you'll have a little bit better estimate of what your costs are going to be. And then in stage 4, when you actually do your procurement solicitation and you choose your vendor, you'll actually have the cost, the real cost of your procurement. So that's how we're looking at changing things, or that's the idea today. Again, we're going to go through a pilot. We're going to work the kinks out, and we're also going to make sure that it marries up with process, because that's a real important aspect of this, because it's a big constraint. It's in cement, so we're going to adjust the model to match up with our state's budget process. So again, we really believe this is going to cure a lot of the being in front of the legislature, explaining why your estimate wasn't exactly the way it was supposed to be. And we all have that when we talk to our bosses and we give them an estimate, and then they run with it. And it's like, no, that was an estimate. And it's like, no, you told me this. And so this is going to help that. It's just going to be able to refine that cost from an estimate to an actual dollar amount with a bid that's submitted and you accept and you say, and then also going through the 6611, where you can negotiate with them and get a final offer and say, this is what we're going to do, and you actually have an idea on your schedule, and things will be better, hopefully. Doesn't mean projects still won't have issues, because we know they do. Things happen.
Francisco.
That's a question.
Well, one thing just to add, because of Francisco, is the BAFO, the best and final offer. We use that for our project. And so, oftentimes when we're reviewing proposals from vendors, they slightly interpret things differently, et cetera. And so we were able to provide some clarification, ask some clarifying questions, or if we saw they did something that would have removed them potentially, ask clarifying questions. And so the BAFO, the costs actually got adjusted. Some, costs came down, got some clarity around schedule, et cetera. So I think the BAFO process is phenomenal personally. So it just really helps you to get some idea and some negotiation before you select your vendor, to kind of hone your proposal.
A few slides back on stage one, I could have sworn that it said peer, oh, there, the green one. That one. Why does it say peer at the bottom of stage one?
Well, that was the original process of how we did projects. You would do your ITCP, your concept, then you would write an FSR, then you would do your RFP, and before you awarded, you had to do an SPR because now you got the actual cost. And that's what Francisco was just referring to. When you do your FSR up front, you're guessing, but when you finally get your RFP and work with Russ's group and get your BAFO, you have more realistic schedules, costs, and everything. And so you would do an SPR, and potentially if you got into future phases or you ran into trouble, you would potentially do more SPRs along the way. The pair is your final closeout of a project. So that was just how are projects done today, and what's changing is what he was trying to show you in this slide.
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because it appears at the bottom of stage one, and
it's on all of them.
It's not about stages on this slide. It's really about the current process is how are we doing it now. The second column is how are we going to do it with the effect of the technology letter to put in, was it S1VA or SB1A, sorry. And then the third is the potential of where we would be in the future with future changes. But no matter which process or which stage in the evolution of this, we'd always have the peer to do at the very end of a project.
And also, once I showed this, I actually realized that there should be something that indicates that project approval would be here, project approval would be here, and in this model, project approval is there. So I realized that, and actually we're gonna revise that so in the class that can be made clear. So every time we show or we go through this, I see things that need to be improved, and that's one of them. To make sure that, yeah, right today, this is project approval. In future, we're hoping that this is where it'll be. Yes?
Do you believe the new project approvals life cycle will eliminate the need for SPRs?
It will not totally. It will eliminate the need for an SPR because you've done your procurement and you were guessing, yes. Because you're not going to actually have a project approved until after it comes out of stage 4. And I have to tell you, when I looked at this model, when they first showed it to me, and they said, oh, by the way, you're going to be the project manager over this. I said, this ain't going to work. But once you start looking at it and you start absorbing what it's actually saying, after a while I'm saying, wow, why haven't we done this before? So it's a re-engineering of the whole process. And if you really think about it, when you look at our process today, that's what's causing most of the problems for projects. You're guessing, and you're forced to guess. I mean, and then you look at past projects. Well, this database system cost 10 million, so let's say 15, and it's really out of the sky. Or you go to a conference and a vendor approaches you and says, yeah, I can do that for 15 million, easy. And well, then when it comes in, it's actually 35 or 40. So the process is causing us a lot of angst, and hopefully this will help us improve that. And then what Russ is doing definitely is going to help. So any other questions? Not, I'm going to sit down. Oh, there's no one. See, I talk too much.
Stood up there too long. Just a quick question, hopefully, in the future release column?
Yes.
At what point do we go out, like say we need consultants to do the project?
Okay.
So at what point, because you don't have the RFP up there anymore, and you have procurement before the solution analysis, so at what point in time do you get the vendors?
The vendors will not be chosen until here.
I think what you're referring to is your consultant help.
Yes.
You'll be getting those in either stage 1, stage 2, depending on your resource needs.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't change. What we'll do when you meet with my team, when you do one of these, we're going to get into an MOU with you to help define that, and then resources are part of that discussion.
Okay.
So when you need someone, we'll be up toward 1 or 2 with those folks.
Gotcha.
Right, and you can see here acquisition strategy, Russ's group, procurement. So yes, they'll be involved with 1, 2, and 3. And actually, at stage 1, when in our process, we actually have critical partners that review it, and our EAs looking at it, the procurement group, the customer delivery division over at OTEC. A lot of people are involved in this process. And your information security.
Thank you. Let's see. Go back to the lessons learned. A couple other scenarios. Okay. Third lesson learned was the use of enterprise architecture and IT procurement plans as compared to the historical list. I think that was your that DGS may have. Any plans to basically deal with that, so that you're not dealing with archaic technology that DGS enforces, but technology that's more relevant to the dynamics of the business today?
Going forward, we are really trying to take more of an architectural focus on knowing more about the technology and the solutions that are being proposed by the vendors. So, and this isn't something that's totally new. FTV's done it on several projects, and also BOE's doing it on one of theirs right now. So, but we plan to follow that same model of engaging the enterprise architect for the vendor early in the conceptual discussions. And then if you're like me, an old dinosaur, that we used to do conceptual and detailed technical discussions which focused around the architectures and the proposed solutions, not just the answer yes to the 5,000 requirements and then we gave you a score for that. So we're looking to do more technical influence into the proposal evaluation, which means we want to look more at their implementation plan, more at their proposed architecture, and be able to evaluate those better. And actually we're getting more engineering support internal to provide us that expertise too. So it's just not, as I'll call it, an administrative evaluation of the RFP now, or the proposal. It's more of a technical evaluation with that administrative piece. So we know what is going to be delivered in that solution before we award the contract. So I think that's maybe a little bit different influence. That's the model we're putting together now to deploy. It's not totally new. It's been used before very successfully, by the way, but we've only really seen it on the larger scale projects. What we'd like to do is drop that influence down into more of the mid-range projects that we're doing. So we think we're going to get better solutions by doing that. The more you can understand what that vendor's doing before they start developing, the better you are, in my opinion. And I think most architects will agree with me on that, because we've been implementing a lot of solutions and trying to figure out what it's going to do when we get it. And we should have known that before we awarded the contract.
Thank you, Russ. The next lesson learned has to do with better collaboration between departments and control agencies, and a list of individuals that are responsible for approvals and procurement. Any comments about that? I think that's kind of what the new process is, really a more of an interactive relationship.
It is a more interactive relationship, and we have been trying at Department of Technology to have our resources who are assigned to your department to collaborate on your portfolio and upcoming projects. Again, I said we have a list on our website of who your associated representative is, and Finance also has the same thing on their website, the list of who the representation are per everybody's department. So if you go to each website, you would see who your representative is, and they are there to help you and guide you. And we do want to collaborate with you before you write an FSR. We don't want to wait till we get an FSR to start collaborating with you. We want to collaborate with you while you're doing your FSR to help guide you. And we'll pull in procurement and finance. It's not that you have to do this alone. We do want to collaborate with you and help guide you.
Thank you. The next lesson learned or
The state hiring process.
I think that it's the timing. You know, can state organizations, as an example, begin to advertise positions before the project is completely approved and procured?
Well, I know Fiscal, because I help oversee Fiscal right now. Fiscal learned from their lessons learned that they advertise before and say the position is available for hire on like 1 July, because each year they get additional resources, or at certain points and phases of their project, they have additional resources onboarding. So they start 2 to 3 months before that and start the hiring process, advertising, interviewing, but no one can officially be hired until the effective date. So they have tried to meet the date and get the staff in more timely. So, and it is challenging because each agency has their own HR that they have to go through in their processes. So again, it's not a one size fits all, but it is something that you might want to look at to advertise, but let them know for sure that they can't be starting until a set date.
So that's a method that Department of Technology and Finance are willing to support.
Well, you still
Without
can't
making a
hire
finding.
because Susan's
Right.
not going to give you money.
You have to have your positions approved.
Sure, no, absolutely. I think that goes without saying. But in terms of the procedural aspects leading up to that, is where the question or the observation came from.
From a department perspective, I think all these lessons learned are really about how do we move as quickly as possible and receive flexibility when we're working with our control agencies in order to have a successful implementation of the project, whatever that is, right? And I think from this, CTA is making a move to try to streamline that upfront process, which can take a long time. But it's not necessarily the entire compendium of work that must be done that we need to do statewide to be able to meet the fact that technology is changing every 18 months and legislation's coming out far frequently than we want, right? And so I think in starting the process, it's the first step. And so as they go through it and get communications, et cetera, we'll see if there's other areas in other departments, whether it's HR or finance or whomever. Because I know for CalHere's, because we have such strict timelines because of the Affordable Care Act, what people know as Obamacare, that's what we're doing, that we have been making, I think, great strides with finance, with CTA, in order to figure out how to be as flexible as possible to meet these dates. And so I think as they go through this process, it's just not all figured out now, right? So a lot of the questions are great questions, but I don't know that anybody can answer them right now. We just have to keep working together to get to that longer term solution.
And just to add on, part of it also is planning. If you know you're getting positions in July, and there's a ramp-up period, then you don't want to have work completed in August when you know it's not going to happen. So you have to sit down and really plan and say, you know what, it may not be till October, December. And you have to be realistic about that and admit that you're not going to be able to get there because there is that ramp-up period. And then being able to explain that that's part of your project planning. And I know it's difficult, but that's the way our process works, so we have to work around that.
Sure. Thank you.
Just one comment on that, because I want to make sure I'm understanding. In my opinion, this is something where we really need to do our homework and be ready to go, because I would never look at CTA and say, go find me resources or tell me how to do it. We have to be ready to juggle our workloads and to work with finance through the BCP process to do our own hiring, right?
But we'll suggest you might want to try to start hiring 2 to 3 months in advance because you have to advertise, get applications. So we'll provide you information that we've learned from other agencies going through.
Or you guys would ask the questions of, are you guys going to be ready
we'll
to
ask.
implement?
And it does
We
take
will
a
ask.
departmental commitment to do the project. If you're not internally committing resources to do this, then you're not serious about the project.
That makes sense. Thank you. Before we adjourn, we have a few more minutes. I think we talked at length about collaboration between program, technology, and control agencies. I wanted to address the one with adequate training budget. I know that that's always a touchy scenario, making sure that training is provided across the board, including training your stakeholders about their participation in procurement. Any plans in that regard to support the departments?
Well, like I said, Christine Bush on our website, we do have training
Good point.
that's out there. As far as budget, every agency has their own budget. I have no control over that, I'm sorry. But we do offer various training. Not everything is a cost. Some of it is free, just like these seminars. We do encourage staff to attend and to gather whatever training information they can get.
All right. I want to thank you. Right now, we're standing between you and the lunch. So I want to thank the panel members for taking the time out of their busy schedule. So let's give them a round of applause. And thank you.
Busy. I was just here.
So thank you for attending. Really appreciate your feedback and comments. Have a great day.